What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video we're working on the 1996 Toyota Camry station wagon again, and I'm going to show you how to replace your gauge cluster bulbs with LEDs. Now I already have LEDs in here. As you can see, my gauge cluster is purple, and I'm going to be putting purple in again, but these, not only are they dim because some of the little LED pad things, whatever they're called, went out, but they also flicker. So right now they're fine, but once they've been on for 10-15 minutes, they literally just flicker all like a Christmas tree, and it's very annoying when you drive at night because sometimes I even lose lights completely. Like they just go out. So assuming that you don't have LEDs, you want to swap for LEDs, let me show you how to do it. To start off, unplug everything you have here because this whole thing is gonna have to come out. So this is all one piece. It's very annoying to do. So what I'm going to do first is get in here with my pry tool, pry this off, and there's another clip on this side. It's a good pry tool. Now you want to pull out on this, but don't pull out on here because there are actually little hooks and you don't want to break those. So at this point you can disconnect this or just set it aside. I'm just going to set it aside like this because you're not touching this area. Now I'm going to take my screwdriver, and there are two Phillips head screws, one on this side of the radio and one on the other side. I'm going to have to remove both of those. And there's another one right here, right next to the ignition switch. And the last thing is, if you look at this gauge cluster right here and right there, there are two Phillips head screws that you're going to have to remove. Oops. Here's one. Take the other one out too. All right, with both of them out of there, what I'm going to do now is start prying on this area right here, and that will remove this side. There aren't really many clips holding it in. It's basically just the screws, and then grab it right here and pull out. The vent will come with it, as well as the mirror controls, so keep that in mind. And at this point, it's going to be a little bit difficult to get this out of the way. Make sure the vent clears the dash here. There we go. So once you're at this stage, I would suggest unplugging everything so you can get this piece right out of the way. That's the easiest way to do it. So I'll come up here and unplug the hazard light switch, then the clock. The clip for this one is underneath. You need two hands for it. It's kind of flat and you have to squeeze it like that. It's different. I don't know why they did that. And then if you come to this side, you'll have the mirror switch as well as the headlight dimmer. And then I have these two for some LED lights that I installed. So at this point, this is free to come out. So I'll set that aside. And now you're gonna see 4 screws holding the gauge cluster in, 2 over there and 2 over here. Remove all 4. And once that's done, you can pull the gauge cluster out. You can't go too far with it because there are connectors behind it, which are right here. At this point, you could replace the bulbs like this, just sneak your hand back there, but it's so much easier to disconnect it and work with it in your hand as opposed to trying to balance it all back here. Remove all of these connectors, and don't worry about forgetting where they go because they only go in one place. Okay, there's one more right here. And just like that, you can pull out your gauge cluster. So once the gauge cluster is out, remove all 4 of these brown bulbs. Again, mine already have LEDs in them, but yours are going to have the halogen bulbs, and they might be soldered onto the bulbs. Sometimes they're clamped on, sometimes they're a little bit soldered. So do whatever you have to do to remove them, but just pulls out, or at least it should. And then to mount the new bulbs, what you're going to have to do is see how the connectors are actually on the side. You're going to want to take these metal tabs and bend them to the side. That will ensure that this bulb makes a connection with these side connectors. Now, as you know, LEDs are typically going to only function with current flowing in one direction. So let's say it'll function this way, but if you flip it, it's not going to light up. And these are the kind that only light up with current flowing in one direction, but there's no way of knowing until you put them in and then you plug in the gauge cluster, turn on the lights, and see if it works. So the only way to do this is to guess, to plug it in, and obviously repeat the same steps for all 4 bulbs. Now that they're all in, I should note that this is actually also a backlight bulb. Now, I actually took the bulb itself out of the socket because you cannot replace this with a regular 194. You might be able to get a 74 bulb in here, but that means you have to buy a whole new pack of 74 bulbs just for this one, which if you want to do, sure, go ahead. But basically the only area that this bulb lights up is the end of the speedometer. So like literally between 135 or 130 and 140. It does not affect the fuel gauge. It does not affect the odometer, anything. The only thing it affects is literally the 140 miles an hour. To me, instead of having 2 different colors of purple here and the factory color there, I just removed that bulb and made that not light up. But honestly, you won't even notice it that much at night because it's lit up everywhere except for 140. Now, in order to get this gauge cluster to light up with the parking lights, they won't actually work unless you plug in the dimmer switch. And the dimmer switch is located right here. So I'm actually going to reconnect the gauge cluster, then connect the dimmer switch, then double check my bulbs, then put everything back together. So get your gauge cluster in place, start reconnecting all this. There's a gray connector that goes at the end, then there's the large white connector. The blue one goes here, and then there's a brown one that goes right in the middle, which lights up the shifter indicator lights. So I'm going to put it in place, kind of. That just provides more shade so I can see the lights. I'm gonna bring my plastic trim piece closer with the switch. So I'll just take this switch and plug it in. Now when you turn on the parking lights, it should work. And it looks like they all work except for that one right there. So I guess I'm gonna have to take that one out and flip it over. All right, I can see that they're all lighting up, so let's put it all back together. All right, so get this gauge cluster into place. By the way, I buffed it, I polished it a little bit, so it's actually a lot cleaner than it was when I uninstalled it. If you're interested in how to buff the gauge cluster and make it look literally brand new again, I have a video on that. I'll link it down in the description. It's not on this car, but it's the same process on any gauge cluster. Just keep in mind when you're cleaning them, they are very soft plastic, so if you're using paper towels or a sponge or your vacuum or anything like that, it will scratch. Snug all these screws up. Next, put this trim piece back on. Make sure it goes behind the steering wheel here. Press this down and in, and then reconnect your connectors. So connect the clock. Connect the hazard switch, which by the way, if you have this unplugged, you won't have turn signals. The turn signal circuit goes through this hazard switch. Just as an FYI, if you have to drive while this is disconnected, unscrew this and put your hazard switch back in or you won't have turn signals. And over here, plug in your dimmer switch as well as the mirror adjusting switch. Make sure they all click in. And I reconnected my LED light switch. At this point you want to line up the vents, make sure they go in, make sure it goes over the parking brake release lever, and then press it all into place. Oops. Once everything is lined up, go ahead and insert your 2 screws up here. These can be a little bit challenging to line up, but just try to pry around on this plastic until you get it to line up and snug them up. And the next step is to put in these 2 screws down here. Snug both of these up. And last but not least, put back your plastic panel here with the outlet, clip it in, readjust your steering wheel height if you had to move it, and give them one last test. I think that looks awesome. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was helpful. All the parts that I used, as well as other videos that are related to this, like I said, will be linked down in the description. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video if you feel like it. If you know anyone that has a Camry like this and wants to perform this modification, go ahead and share it with them. And having said that, I'll see you in the next one.